Hello and welcome to Epiphytic Cacti. Today I figured we'd take a look at the Epiphyllum hybrid Angela Paetz. Now Angela Paetz is supposed to be an Aporophyllum type, and that is generally reflected in the branches. Now I feel like that term is questionable, so we'll just say that, like, you know, hybrids that have branches that are 3, 4 more angled consistently, well, sometimes we call them Aporophyllum type. And it can just sort of happen because of the Aporocactus hybridizing. I think that this flower is beautiful and everything, and there is another hybrid that is Lucifer Paetz. And Lucifer Paetz, they look kind of similar, actually. I see Lucifer Paetz more often than I see Angela Paetz, really. These Aporophyllum type, generally in my experience, they grow considerably slower, and it generally takes them a much longer time to bloom. I very strongly struggle to grow these in my area. My area is very wet. It rains here a whole lot during the spring and summer and fall. It's just very rainy. And the Aporophyllum types, because of that Aporocactus lineage, they don't like as much water. Because I've had such an easier time with any of the Aporophyllum types if I have kept them in very small pots. A lot of times when I get them from other places and I start them here, they look horrible for a long time before they actually just kind of snap out of whatever's going on, acclimatize, and then start growing somewhat okay. They're really not my favorite for that reason. You know, like, as a plant grower, it's always kind of difficult to have plants around your house that are just kind of ugly. And that's kind of what happens. They just look kind of ugly. There's another thing. They are pest magnets. For me, because of the area that I live in and everything, and because they have to come indoors and stuff, they are horrible when they get mealybugs because it's really, really hard to get rid of them without any kind of chemical intervention. So, and because of these branches and just because of the way that they're shaped, and, you know, they have so many more nooks and crannies and everything, mealybugs are horrifying on these guys. The same thing is true for scale. If they get scale, it's really, really hard to deal with. And then one last thing that's really difficult is that these guys indoors are actually prone to spider mites. And spider mites on these guys are tragic. It's really hard to deal with the spider mites. And that is really, I think, just down to the dry air, you know, and it's complicated because you don't really want to spray them indoors. You know, you don't really want them to get like all kinds of fungal issues because there's not enough airflow. And even if you have fans running, you got issues with fresh airflow and all of that kind of stuff. Your heater's running, the air's dry. It's just a perfect recipe for just being absolute pest magnets. So growing these guys, these Aporophyllum types, is considerably harder. Because her branches aren't 3 to 4 angled, she doesn't really have as bad of problems, but she did get spider mites, and boy was it really, really difficult. And the spider mites, it just pretty much immediately goes like really brown at the areoles, and they just attack those areoles, and then, you know, they damage the areoles beyond repair, and then they can't really grow out of those, and then they can't really bloom out of those. But you know, she's kind of doing a little bit better now, but she's still real ugly. So yeah, she's not the most beautiful plant, but she's got a lovely flower. So her flower really is just kind of a medium-sized flower, and you can see it's very, very, very red. Flowers like this are always the worst to try to capture, to photograph and stuff, because the camera can't really pick up or differentiate all that well the subtleties in color of flowers like these, because there is a subtlety in color here. So there is kind of this orange kind of mid-stripe here, just right down the center, which then goes into a very, 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 very red color. And then just at the very outer edges here, you can see that there is kind of a fuchsia, kind of a purplish sort of color. And that actually goes all the way through all the petals. And then the back petals, they are just a little bit more narrow. So that's really kind of the color combination there. And you can see just how absolutely sort of incandescent, I guess you would call that. The throat can actually be here in the sunlight. That's always been one of my favorite things about the epiphyllum, is that when the sun catches these hybrids, when it catches the flowers just right, it just has such an interesting kind of glowing appearance down in the throat because the flower tube is green. It's just really cool looking. I always loved that. But it's a really, really nice, medium-sized, well-formed, beautiful kind of flower. And I feel like if this plant grew better than this, you know, it would be really, really a gorgeous plant. So, you know, I don't want to deter people from like growing these because you might not have the same kind of experiences as me. I think that I just happen to have the perfect recipe for disaster for growing these, but they are really wonderful, really beautiful, and really joyful if you can, you know, not have those kinds of problems. There we go. Isn't that just really beautiful? I hope that you've enjoyed the Aporophyllum type hybrid Angela Paetz as much as I have. Thank you for watching, and happy cacti growing.